10 minutes past 10. There are 828 species of Australian native birds, at last count anyway. It doesn't include the 27 introduced birds, or sadly 13 that are now extinct. Of those 828 birds, there are 50 that are considered threatened. Today you will learn more about a bird that is probably best known for its loud screeching, the cockatoo. Scott McPhee is with me for birds discussion. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Hey, Belinda. Oh, I'm pretty good. How are you? It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been a little while. I understand that cockatoos are your favourite group of birds. Why is that?
They are. Yeah. Well, look, I think just with cockatoos, the lights are on in someone's home. Anyone who's had any kind of close interaction with them, you just see how intelligent they are. Particularly, you look at the eyes and the way they look at you and analyse what's going on. They're just very engaging animals, and yeah, they're my favourite.
Well, we normally start each episode with a recording, so let's have a listen to a cockatoo in action.
What a beautiful sound.
Is it?
How some people can find that raucous and unappealing, I have no idea. But that was one of the sounds that inspired early European colonisers to start importing European songbirds into Australia. And I have no idea why.
So how many species of cockatoo, do we have in this country?
Well, look, this is pretty much cockatoo central. There's 21 species of cockatoos in the world, 14 of which are found in Australia. And out of that 14, 11 are only found in Australia and nowhere else. So just over half the world's cockatoo species are only found in Australia. That's 11 out of 21. And in the listening area, we have 9 species of cockatoos. So that's pretty cool, I think.
It certainly is. So why does Australia have so many?
Yeah, well, this goes back to the evolution of them. So cockatoos, as we all know, are parrots, and they evolved in Gondwana. Their earliest ancestors that we've identified about 90 million years ago. So this is right back in the Cretaceous when the world was still full of dinosaurs. Then about 82 million years ago, New Zealand started to break off, and it took the New Zealand parrots with it. And then probably about 75 million years ago, we can identify the first ancestors of cockatoos. So this is before the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, about 65 million years ago. Then Australia fully broke off from Gondwana about another 30 million years after that. And that's when we start to see the big evolution of cockatoos and the diversification of them as Australia drifted north. And so we get this by integrating the DNA studies along with fossil records and what the geology is telling us as well. So basically they evolved in the area where we are. So this is why we have so many of them.
Now, tell me about the 9 species that you mentioned of cockatoos that are in this area.
Yeah, well, if we continue on what the genetics are telling us, that they say it tells us that cockatoos are broadly divided into 2 groups. So that's the black cockatoos, and then all the other cockatoos, most of which are white. So on the black cockatoo side, in the listening area, we've got yellow-tailed black cockatoos. So why don't we have a listen to them?
Very, very different sound, Scott. That's a really different sound to the first one,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of a bit harsh, but a bit high-pitched. And when you hear them flying, like that particular recording there, they're a little bit intense, but they have a bit of a mournful quality to their call, I think, when they're flying. And they're just amazing birds to look at. They're our longest cockatoo. They're longer than the palm cockatoos up in North Queensland, but the palm cockatoos are heavier. And they've got a black body, the yellow cheek patches and yellow tail panels. In the listening area...
Can I just say, sorry, that sounds like in southern Queensland we have the long, slender cockatoo, and in North Queensland they have the short, stubby cockatoo.
Yes, the white cockatoo. But, the palm cockatoo is kind of cool in a lot of ways because the male does the drumming to attract the females, and I think it's partly sorting out what nest hollow is good, but all the different males have their own different drum beat to impress the females, and we don't get that with any of the cockatoos down here, so I guess that's the trade-off for
fair enough.
What they get up north. But yeah, the yellowtails are we get them kind of from Mitchell eastwards, but the strongest area is around the Great Dividing Range and then down to the coast, particularly. I guess that axis between Toowoomba and the Sunshine Coast is quite good for them.
So you'll see them quite a lot.
Yeah. they're fairly common around Toowoomba along the escarpment, particularly north of Toowoomba. And then we get the red-tailed black cockatoos, so why don't you have a listen to them?
Yeah, still a screech.
Yes, it's kind of just a little bit deeper. So the sound's just a little bit different to the yellowtails, and they're slightly smaller as well. And I just love looking at these guys fly because they kind of lollop along. They don't look like they're meant to be flying. If anyone who's seen them, I think it's quite kind of comical the way they fly. And we get them right throughout the listening area, all the way up to the very western edge of the listening area. And they're famous for following the rain around. And I don't know if there's any scientific study that's backed that up, but I can certainly say that I can attest to that with my observations, and other birders can, and I'm sure particularly farmers would be aware of that as well.
So do they appear before the rain or during the rain or after the rain?
All of it.
So if you hear the screeches, you'll expect a bit of rain? Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, and certainly if you've got rain building up, you can get them appearing in the La Nina around 2011, 2012. There are a lot of them in Toowoomba then, and back, not last year, the year before, 1.5 years ago, there's also another group here as well, with the wet that came just after the drought. So, they definitely follow the rain. Budgies do that as well. It might be a low-level hearing thing that they can do, the deeper sounds of clouds and thunder build, but we don't quite know how they do it, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that they are doing that. So
good
I wouldn't
tip.
mind betting that we're going to see some here this season.
Good tip.
Summer now, yep. And then we have the glossy black cockatoos, and people often confuse these with red-tailed blacks, but let's have a listen to them.
The size is a bit of a difference, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah. And, just listening to that, I know that sounds raucous, but it's just music to my ears. I just love hearing it. So these guys, they're kind of like mini red-tailed black cockatoos. Once you get a good look at them, it's easy to tell the difference. They're probably about 3/4 of the size. They're particularly smaller in the torso, so the kind of proportions of the body are one thing to look out for. And the females have a bit of yellow around their face, but these guys have been in the news a lot lately for all the wrong reasons. Now, there's 3 subspecies of them, one in central Queensland, which we don't get here. The one that we get here in the listening area kind of wraps around the coast down to Victoria. And then there's another one on Kangaroo Island off South Australia. So the bushfires in 2019-20, they had a devastating effect in Kangaroo Island, but also on the southeastern population on the mainland. And just a couple of weeks ago, the new Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, upgraded the status of the southeastern subspecies to vulnerable as a result of the damage from all of the bushfires.
Yeah, that's sad. What does that mean in real terms?
Yeah, so it just means that now more funding can be released to help with recovery projects and habitat replanting and things like that. And so that's the subspecies we get here, the southeastern Australian one. We get them about as far out as Roma, but like the other like the yellowtail black cockatoo, the strongholds mainly the range across to the coast. And part of their problem is they're extremely specialised in all of their habits. They'll only eat the seed off of a couple of species of casuarina trees, and these will only be trees that are about 10 years old, and they only have a chick about every second year. They'll have one chick, and that will stay with the parents for a year, so they can only breed every 2 years. And, it's like they're doing everything they can to become extinct. So habitat preservation is critical for feeding and for breeding. They really prefer gum trees a couple hundred years old. They're doing everything they can to kind of make it hard to survive. And, I don't want to put the boot into the Anglican Church because I know they've done a lot of good things, but they also did a lot of clearing at Noosa just recently where they cleared 56 of these feed trees for a development in a known feeding spot for the birds. So
and it's quite well known, this feeding spot?
Yeah, it is, yeah. And there's been a big campaign I guess it's a bit late because they've cleared the trees, but there's a big campaign by the Noosa residents called Save Sunrise Glossies to try and stop this. And look, they are trying to offset it by planting 1,000 trees nearby. But the problem, because these birds are so particular, is that they won't even look at those trees till they're about 10 years old. And then you can have trees that are entirely suitable, but they don't like them. So you might have a whole stand of maybe a dozen trees that are entirely suitable, but they'll only pick one of them. So the fact that it was a well-established feeding spot is a bit of a tragedy that it's gone. But anyway, we live in hope. That they are responding, particularly on Kangaroo Island, to nesting boxes and things like that. So the more we can do to keep these guys going, the better, because everything we do in terms of habitat destruction affects their food and their breeding capability, and because they're kind of on an edge with how specialised they are, the outlook is not very good with them. Now, have a guess what the other bird in the black cockatoo grouping is?
Well, I think it's one that you might hear in the pet birding world.
Yes.
The cockatiel.
Exactly. Yes, perfect. Yeah, cockatiels. Now, when I found that out, I thought, what the hell? But cockatiels, as we know, they're found right throughout the listening area. Probably a lot of listeners will call them quarians. I'm used to calling them quarians, but the official common name is cockatiels. And
do you want to listen to one? I've got one.
Oh, you've got one?
Yeah, I can play the cockatiel. Shall we have a listen? No, I don't have one, but we can have a listen to it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Let's have a listen so we know.
Now, that is a pretty call.
It is. And do you know what? When I was sorting out all of these audio recordings the other day on my computer, when I played that one, suddenly my cat went crazy, jumped up on the desk, started investigating speakers and behind the monitor. I wanted to find out where this little cockatiel was, but he didn't do that to any of the cockatoo calls.
Interesting. He knew the cockatoo would take him on. Now, Scott, your cat is obviously inside, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, has to be.
He's an inside cat, but he was a rescue from the RSPCA, and I'm pretty sure he survived on birds for quite a while.
Yeah, so it's really important that cats are kept inside for that reason.
And look, maybe that's something that we could do a discussion on one day, because the toll from domestic predation is higher. Domestic cat predation is higher per square kilometre than feral cat predation, just because the density in the cities is high. But anyway, that's something we can look at. And this cat, Indy, definitely lives inside. But I don't have any cockatiels, but the relationship to them with black cockatoos goes back about 22 million years ago. That's where they split off. This is based on the genetic similarities. And you can still see it in them, that they have the cheek patches like the black cockatoos do, and they also have the tail panels. That's probably about the only similarity that they've got. And I believe they're the second most popular cage bird in the world after budgerigars.
Oh, there you go. I did not know that. Yeah. Both Australians are natives as well.
Yeah, they're very cute little birds, aren't they? Okay. So on the other side of the fence, after all the black cockatoos, if we look at let's look at three in one group. So no one will, I'm sure I don't need to introduce these to anyone. The sulphur-crested cockatoo, galahs, and little corellas, and they're found right throughout the listening area, and all of them have adapted really well to the agricultural lands and the urban environments, particularly park environments.
Does that have something to do with their intelligence?
Yeah, it certainly does. So I can give you a few examples. I once read a great story about galahs in the wheat belt in Western Australia back in the 70s, when they used to ship the wheat in Hessian bags. The galahs had worked out how to undo the stitching to get the wheat out, and so they had to change the bags they were using. And then a lot of listeners may have heard recently in the last year or two or seen videos of the sulphur-crested cockatoos in Sydney opening wheelie bins, and they go in there looking for scraps. And it's all because their intelligence allows them to adapt to new environments, and it just gives them a competitive edge. And the cockatoos in Sydney, they're teaching each other how to do it. So in the different suburbs, they have slightly different methods, and it's a cultural transmission process that's going on. So it's just a way of adapting really successfully to the modified environment that we've created. And just north of here in New Guinea, there's a species of corella. It's much like the little corella, but we don't get it here. It's called Goffin's corella. And they actually create tools to help them get seeds out of fruit. So they make three different kinds of tools to cut into these soft fruits and pull the seeds out. And tool use is not unknown. The New Caledonian crow is a great example of that. But we think with the crows, or the New Caledonian crows, it's more hardwired into them. But with these corellas, there's only a few in each population that are doing it, and they're teaching each other. So it's because of their intelligence, they have a culture, and they can learn and teach things to each other. So Yeah, so the other species of corella that we get here, just moving on, is the long-billed corella, which we shouldn't really get here in the listening area. They've been introduced from Western Victoria, so why don't we have a listen to them? Yeah, it's a similar call to little corellas, but just a little bit harsher. These birds are slightly bigger. And if anyone, have you ever seen one, Belinda?
I couldn't recognise it if I have.
Yeah, they have. There's a slight kind of red ring around the base of their neck. You can identify them with that, but if you see one up close, the top mandible on their beak is massive, and it's got a big, huge hook on it, and it just makes it look like you never want to get near to one in your life because they
Fair enough.
hook on their beak. But they use that for digging up grass and pulling out grass roots and things underground. We get them from about Dalby eastwards, but they're mainly concentrated down around the coast. And they're not meant to be here, but they've been popping up everywhere over the last 20 years, and no one really knows why. And it's quite likely that they're escapees from people's aviaries or, the pet trade. So they're integrated quite well here. So that's 8 of them. Now the last cockatoo that we get in the listening area, I think, is easily one of the most beautiful birds in the world, and it's the pink cockatoo. So let's have a listen. That's maybe not quite as raucous as the other cockatoos. Kind of a bit of a squeal there. Now, look, probably all the listeners, and certainly myself, have called them Major Mitchells my whole life, but I'm trying to get myself out of that because I'm not a very politically correct guy, but if you look into Major Thomas's Mitchell background and things that he did in his life, honestly, I don't think that anything as beautiful as a pink cockatoo should be named after him. So I don't actually know. I think Major Mitchell cockatoo is still their official name, but I'm sure that's going to get looked at some stage. And so this is why I'm referring to them as pink cockatoos. And if anyone has ever seen them in the wild, they are just the most beautiful bird. They're all pink. Their crest is pink and yellow. Very similar body shape to the sulphur-crested cockatoo, but the crest is just a little bit larger. And we get them right out west. They prefer the drier woodland country, so from about Roma westwards, and they're also listed as vulnerable in Queensland. And feral cats and habitat destruction are again the two biggest threats that they've got. So that's it. Nine species of cockatoo in the listening area. I think we're blessed, and people come from all around the world to see these kinds of things that we have, and hopefully don't take for granted all around us.
Yes, we need to make sure that they stay here, even if they are fussy. They don't know that they're not supposed to be fussy. They just are what they are.
Exactly, and I just think they're awesome.
and worth preserving. Thank you so very much, Scott. What else are you up to now?
Yep. Well, I'm going to be delivering a talk at Cobb & Co Museum on Wednesday the 7th at 2 o'clock. This is, it'll be a 1-hour presentation. It's all about how to attract birds to your garden. So there'll even be some notes there if you want to attract cockatoos, but most people are interested in the smaller little birds. So that'll be at Cobb & Co here in Toowoomba, Wednesday the 7th at 2 p.m. If you can't make that, we're going to live stream it. So on Facebook, on my Bird Bites channel, if you have a look there, there'll be a live streaming of that presentation as well. So lots of tips on how to attract birds and lots of videos of the different birds that you can get.
And an icon is our next subject.
That's right, yes. So the emu, which has got a very interesting history. So we'll look at emus on Wednesday, September 21st.
Thanks, Scott. I look forward to talking to you then.
No worries, Belinda. That's great. Well, thank you very much for that.
That's Scott McPhee, who talks birds here on ABC Southern Queensland. And you have all the information you need to know, for now at least, and perhaps you'd like to look more into it, on the cockatoo. And if you'd like to attract birds to your garden, the Cobb & Co talk is on September the 7th at 2 o'clock.